I never thought a single night could change the course of an entire nation, until the night Iran encountered Jesus. This is not a political story. This is not a conspiracy. This is not propaganda. This is a real testimony, a testimony of encounter, deliverance, and transformation. In a city filled with history, poetry, and deep religious devotion. From the time I was a child, faith was not just something we practiced. It was the air we breathed. I was raised as a devout Muslim. I learned to pray at an early age. I memorized verses. I fasted during Ramadan. I honored the traditions of my family and my culture. And I believed, sincerely, that Islam was the only truth. I was not rebellious. I was not searching for another religion. I was not angry at God. In fact, I feared God deeply. I wanted to please Him. I wanted to be righteous. I wanted to be accepted. But despite everything I had learned, there was a hunger inside me I could not explain. It was not intellectual doubt. It was not political dissatisfaction. It was something deeper. It was a quiet emptiness. As a young man, I began searching for meaning beyond routine rituals. I watched the world around me carefully. I saw people praying with their lips, but living with bitterness in their hearts. I saw corruption hidden behind religious language. I saw fear used as control. I saw questions silenced rather than answered. And deep inside, I began to wonder, is this all there is? I tried harder. I prayed more intensely. I fasted more strictly. I attended more religious gatherings. But the harder I tried, the heavier I felt. It felt like I was climbing a ladder that never reached the sky. I didn't expect the answer to come the way it did. One night, everything changed. It started quietly. A friend I trusted, someone who had also been asking questions, told me about a book. He did not say its name out loud at first. He spoke carefully, almost in whispers. He told me he had been reading something different. Something forbidden. A Bible. In Iran, owning a Bible in Persian, especially as a Muslim background believer, can bring serious consequences. It is seen as turning away from Islam. It can cost you your job, your family relationships, your safety. In some cases, even your freedom. But curiosity had already begun stirring in me. Weeks later, I found myself holding an old, worn copy of the New Testament. The cover was plain. No gold letters. No decoration. It looked ordinary. But my hands were shaking. I waited until everyone in my house was asleep. I locked my door. I turned off the main lights and kept only a small lamp on my desk. And I opened it. At first, the words felt foreign. The names were unfamiliar. The culture seemed distant. I read slowly, almost defensively, looking for something to criticize. Then I reached a passage that stopped me. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11 verse 28. I froze. Weary? Burdened? Rest? No one had ever spoken to me like that. Religion had told me to work harder. Tradition had told me to perform better. Fear had told me to be careful. But this voice, this Jesus, was inviting. Not demanding. Inviting. I read it again. And again. Something began happening inside me that I cannot fully explain even today. It was as if those words were not just ink on paper. They were alive. A peace washed over me. Something I had never felt in a mosque, in a sermon, or in any moment of religious performance. I read about Jesus healing the sick, forgiving sinners, touching the untouchable, eating with those considered impure. He did not operate through fear. He operated through love. And I began to weep. Not quiet tears. Deep, shaking tears. In that moment, I realized something painful and beautiful at the same time. I was desperate for deliverance. But I did not know how broken I truly was until Jesus met me. But in Iran, encounters do not stay private for long. Believing in Jesus publicly is considered apostasy, turning away from Islam. That word carries heavy consequences. It can mean social rejection, government scrutiny, interrogation, and imprisonment. For weeks, I kept my reading secret. But eventually, I needed to speak to someone. That same friend who had first mentioned the Bible introduced me to a small group. We met in an apartment. Curtains closed. Phones turned off or left in another room. We entered separately, not in groups. There were no church buildings. No public worship signs. No loud music. Just a small living room. A handful of people. And a hunger for truth. We prayed softly. We sang in whispers. We read scripture in Persian. We shared testimonies of dreams, questions, and small miracles. We knew the risks. We knew what could happen if we were discovered. Converts have been arrested. Some sentenced to prison terms. Some pressured to deny their faith publicly. Families have been torn apart. And yet people kept coming. Young people. University students. Business owners. Former religious leaders. They were not coming for rebellion. They were coming for freedom. I still remember the night I truly surrendered. I had been attending the house church for months. I believed intellectually. I felt emotionally moved. But something still held me back, fear. Fear of losing family. Fear of government consequences. Fear of the unknown. That night, after everyone left, I stayed behind alone in the apartment. The room was quiet. The city lights flickered through the curtains. And I fell to my knees. For the first time in my life, I did not repeat memorized prayers. I spoke honestly. Jesus, if you are real, show me who you are. There was no thunder. No dramatic vision. No audible voice. But something inside me shifted. The burden I had carried, the fear, the performance, the constant striving, lifted. Not like a passing emotion, but like chains breaking inside my spirit. I felt known, fully known, and still loved. I realized I did not need to earn acceptance. It had already been given. Jesus was no longer a historical figure mentioned respectfully in Islamic tradition. He was alive, and he had changed me. Over time, I began hearing similar stories from others. A woman who saw Jesus in a dream and began searching for a Bible. A former government worker who felt emptiness despite career success. A young university student who began questioning violence done in God's name. Something was happening beneath the surface of Iranian society. Quietly, underground, unannounced by media. People were encountering Jesus personally. Not through political campaigns. Not through foreign influence. But through dreams, scripture, satellite broadcasts, private conversations, and small gatherings in living rooms. Despite legal restrictions and fear, Christianity, especially among Muslim background believers, began to grow. Not loudly, but steadily. And here is what surprised me most. Persecution did not stop it. In some ways it purified it. Because no one comes to Christ in Iran casually. It costs too much. You do not convert for convenience. You convert because you have encountered something real. For me, the greatest miracle was not external protection. It was internal transformation. I used to live in constant anxiety, worrying whether I had prayed correctly, whether I had done enough good deeds, whether God was pleased or disappointed. Now I lived from assurance. Not arrogance. Assurance. Worldly titles became temporary. Religious performance lost its grip. Fear of human judgment became smaller. I began forgiving people who had hurt me. I began loving differently. I began seeing people not as threats or labels, but as souls. Deliverance was not just about escaping oppression. It was about freedom from inside. Let me be honest. Faith in Iran carries cost. There are interrogations. There are threats. There are house church raids. I personally experienced questioning. I experienced being monitored. I experienced the pressure to return quietly to Islam and forget what I had discovered. But something had already changed in me. When you have tasted freedom, it is difficult to return to fear. And I realized something powerful. You can control buildings. You can silence public gatherings. You can confiscate books. But you cannot control a heart that has encountered Jesus. When I say, the night Iran encountered Jesus, I do not mean one single calendar date marked in history books. I mean the night thousands of individuals, in separate rooms, separate cities, separate circumstances, whispered the same prayer. Jesus, show me who you are. And he did. One heart at a time. A businessman in Tehran. A mother in Isfahan. A student in Shiraz. A laborer in Mashhad. No political revolution. No violent uprising. Just hearts awakening. Because when Jesus enters a heart, change begins quietly, but it spreads. And when enough hearts change, a nation shifts. Tonight, I speak not just as someone who once struggled, not just as someone who found Jesus in the shadows of fear, but as someone whose life was utterly delivered. Jesus did not reveal himself to Iran through headlines. He did not arrive through government reform. He came through love. He came through invitation. He came through peace in the middle of anxiety. He came through a simple verse on a quiet night. Come to me, and I will give you rest. And that invitation continues. The story is not finished. Deliverance is still happening. Whispers are still turning into prayers. Living rooms are still becoming sanctuaries. And courage is rising where fear once ruled. Because where Jesus shows up, lives change. And where lives change, families transform. And where families transform, nations begin to awaken. I am living proof. And I am not alone. The night Iran encountered Jesus was not about politics. It was about hearts. And that awakening is still unfolding.